Bypassing is when we find any kind of way to avoid doing the work it actually takes to heal and transform. What does it truly take to heal and transform? A lot of times it's the hard, scary things. And so bypassing it is when we find any way to actually avoid facing the hardest things, facing the scary things that are really going to move the needle for you. And there's so many ways that that can show up. It's also when we find any way to avoid, dodge, divert, and drag on dysfunctional behaviors, relationships, or situations in our lives. Bypassing happens all the time, and it often gets worse after you've learned the basics and the language and you know about dysfunctions. I see this happen all the time. All of a sudden, you get some of the basics, you get the language down because you know it somehow gives you a bypass, not a pass, but somehow it gives you a bypass on actually doing the work. And then you use that language to twist it. Oh, well, I've had so many things come up recently. Oh, that's why you couldn't get in your journal. Oh, yeah, I was just really in my feels, I was just like really like letting it all just really come up. That's why you numbed out on Netflix for 10 hours this weekend straight? Okay. All right. Oh, it was just a lot. I just felt really heavy. I see. Okay. I see what you're doing there. It happens all the time. It's okay. But remember, keep this in front of you. Keep the shadow in front. Because you've learned the basics, the language, it's easy for you to be like, well, I know that that's what I'm doing right now. I know that I'm bypassing right now, just enough to be dangerous to yourself. So let's talk about the dangers of bypassing the work real fast and why we have to have this conversation. The number one danger behind bypassing the work is how easy it is to do. It's really easy to do, especially when you're doing the work. It's no different than being like, yeah, I go to therapy, I'm woke. And it's like, are you though? You think that you're like better than or ahead. At least I'm in therapy, right? And it's like, yeah, but all you do is just kind of persecute your coworkers the whole time. So I don't really know like how much better you're getting from that, right? It's also very easy when you're bypassing to get on a spiritual high horse and to think that you know it all or think that your feelings are always right. So if you feel something, you think they're right, but you're still actually feeling and thinking an assumption, but then you don't realize that you're doing the very thing, but now it's even worse because you think you're doing it right, but you're actually just still in the triangle. And it can be even harder to see it because of all the other things that you learned around it. Another danger of bypassing the work is you build mirror resistance. And so this is why the bypassing gets easier and more sneaky. Sometimes the longer you do the work, because you start to build up this like, oh, well, I know these things, or like, I've been doing this for so long and I know all this stuff, right? And so you become more resistant and you become more defensive. You have less and less and less of a beginner's mind, which also leaves you less and less and less open. Think about at your company, right? How over time, the people that are there the longest start to become less and less open to change. It's the same thing. Like at first in the beginning, there's that honeymoon phase and you're about it and you're all about it. And then all of a sudden, eventually you start to kind of close up, right? And then you don't want to be told, or you don't want to be held accountable, et cetera, et cetera. Because you're used to now the mirrors, you start to anticipate them, which actually makes you clench even more without even realizing it. And there's this like ego thing that happens like, oh, I should know better and I shouldn't have to have stuff come up. It's like, it's so complex, right? So your defenses come up. This is why I always say, have a beginner's mind. Your tenure means nothing. As a matter of fact, you see this with some of the greatest spiritual teachers. You see this with some of the greatest entrepreneurs. You see this with some of the greatest leaders. They say, the higher up I go, the more I realize I don't know shit. I totally butchered that. I said that the Lillian way, but it's true, right? The more and more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. The more and more you rise to the top, the more you realize there is to learn. And that really is abundance mindset. That is growth mindset. Last but not least, and this part is also really, really important as well, it can lead to manipulating others, which actually further complicates your relationships to yourself, to your mentors, and to other community members, your friendships, your family, and so forth. How does bypassing the work actually show up? So there are lots and lots of examples here. Some of them I will just run through them really quickly, and some of them I will pause and kind of elaborate on them a little bit further. First and foremost, self-diagnosing. The problem with self-diagnosing is because then again, you start using terms and diagnoses for the reason why you can't. It's because I'm a cancer. It's because I was dissociating. It's because I'm shutting down. It's because I was feeling triggered. It's because da, 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 da. So it becomes a reason why you can't actually show up and do the work. And then you use self-diagnosis as a way to actually shield yourself from really doing the work. Twisting the lessons. There are so many examples of this. One of the most common ones that I often see is somehow along the lines of, now that you've learned about needs, and now that you've learned about feelings, you might get into a trauma bond, or you might get into a situation that doesn't really serve you. And you'll be like, well, they make me feel safe. But the fact that you even said they make me feel safe is already a red flag, because no one can make you feel. Spiritual bypassing. This is basically, look at how spiritual I am. I'm clearly doing the work. I know spiritual things. I have crystals and I use astrology. I even cast spells every now and again. I like spiritual stuff. I got myself a diffuser this past weekend. Some of the ways that we also bypass is by, one, hiding behind the work. So instead of actually doing the thing, instead of going and taking the action, you're just analyzing it. So there's a lot of hiding. There's hiding in all forms. There's hiding behind busyness. And this busyness does not just have to be work. This busyness can be hiding behind, oh my God, well, it was so-and-so's birthday, and then I had this event, and then I had that event, and then I had to do a baby shower, and then I was taking care of this, and then I was traveling. And that's why you couldn't show up. But remember, a huge part of doing the work and learning how to do the work is to integrate it into your life, no matter what. That's the whole point. The whole point is that even when you're on vacation, you naturally work in times for yourself. Even if it's to just meditate for 5 minutes, even if it's to just really touch down and just internalize the gratitude, even if it's for you to just kind of stay on top of, if any triggers come up, making sure that you're communicating, making sure that you're setting boundaries, working out, taking care of yourself, sleeping, drinking, hydrating, so forth. And so many people come back after a busy season and they're in shambles because you didn't even keep up with your basics. That's doing the work, y'all. A lot of times, don't get it twisted. Doing the work doesn't mean that you just have to be in your journal crying all the time. That's not what I mean, right? A lot of times doing the work is just maintaining your foundations, maintaining your basics, hiding behind people who need you. These are my chronic clinical rescuers. Well, so-and-so needed me. My business needed me. Oh, my sister needed me. Oh, well, my friend needed me. Someone's always in need and someone's always in crisis. So it's way easier for you to bypass you doing your work because it makes you feel like you're doing something good when all you're actually doing is just avoiding your own stuff. Hiding behind any life events. I'm talking any life events, from weddings to somebody having a baby in your life, to somebody passing in your life, to you getting laid off, to your spouse getting laid off, to you getting a new job. It could literally be anything. All this to say, part of doing the work is about moving through your life transitions with ease, flow, and grace. The entire point of us doing the work is that we don't hide behind those life events, and instead we realize that it's part of our journey. And now we use those life events as a muse, as a different way to use the work, to integrate the work, to breathe through, to flow through, to be present, to find comfort in discomfort. This is a major thing that I see all the time. As soon as a life event, something happens, it's so easy to put it on that, or that be the reason. And I'm not saying that you can't grieve. I'm not saying that you can't be stressed. I'm not saying that you can't be going through a hard time. That's life. But the whole point is, don't abandon yourself. Don't jump ship. That's hiding. That's hiding, and that's bypassing the work. That's not a reason why you can't show up. As a matter of fact, grieve, struggle, be in pain, move through it, and learn how to ask for support. That's you doing the work. Learn how to still maintain your foundations and your boundaries. That's you doing the work. Learn how to still show up for yourself and not turn into a victim. That's you doing the work. Hiding behind your growth. This is another one that I see often, which is, I've grown. And then what happens? Then you hide. And then you think you're good for a little while because you did the thing. Well, I did the thing. I checked off my self-development box. I checked off my healing box. Or like, oh yeah, they all see that I've grown. I'm so much better now. So you coast. To me, me, it's not that much different from finally losing 10 pounds after working so hard. And then what happens? You're like, I've already hit my goal. I can cruise for a little while. It's fine. Like, I deserve it. Like, I can eat this 5-pound brownie sundae, right? And you kind of like hide behind your growth. And then you do another nibble here, and then you do another nibble here. Next thing you know, you stop tracking for a week. And then that 1 week turns into 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks. And then next thing you know, you've put on 5 pounds in the last 3 weeks, and you're back on that roller coaster again. So I'm using that as an example so that you can see it's not that much different. So with that said, to kind of continue to elaborate from there, this is where our ego starts to get ahead of us and we think that we're somehow complete, we're somehow done. And remember, healing is always an ongoing process. And of course, we are always healing, and of course, we're always growing, and we're better than where we were a year ago, we're better than where we were 2 years ago. But to tell yourself to think that you have healed in a certain area is actually setting yourself up for failure, right? Because then you let your guards down, you let your ego get in the way, you start thinking that you're maybe better than someone else with a similar issue. That's when you start losing empathy and compassion for others. And there's a whole like slippery slope of things that can ripple from having this attitude or mindset. So we really, really want to be mindful of that. Over-analyzing things to the point of missing the entire lesson. A lot of times it's like, stop trying to figure it out. It's not about figuring it out. Like, there's nothing to figure out anymore. Yes, mom stuff. Yes, this. Yes, not enoughness. Like, we already know there's nothing to figure out. Just do the thing. Just go do it, and go do it again and again and again and again. And when you fail to do it again, don't analyze it. Just do it again and just try it again. Because at this point, you don't need to figure out why you forgot to do it this time. The answer is actually really simple. Your programming runs deep, and that's that. So just do it again, and do it again until you do it again. And then you do it again until that's just what you do, right? And sometimes that's just what it takes. But I think a lot of times we stay in our heads and we overanalyze the situation. And it's not, sometimes it's an analysis paralysis. We're literally like stuck in fear. But a lot of times we just overanalyze and overanalyze and overanalyze because we're still trying to find some kind of reason that will make you feel better. That's the part that I'm talking about. We keep overanalyzing and sitting and thinking, I'm gonna find the answer. There's an answer. There's a reason why I can't do the thing. And it's like, no. At a certain point, you just have to do the thing. What do you need to do to clean up your street? Period. What's the right thing to do right now? What's the simplest, lowest hanging fruit action you can take right now that can make you feel better, that can make you take accountability, that can put you in a place of RR? You see, that has nothing to do with analyzing. There's nothing to analyze there. There's nothing to figure out there. You just have to sit down for a second and pause and be like, all right, this is what I got to do. And then with that said, similarly, using things coming up as a reason for not showing up. This is similar to hiding behind life events. Being too triggered. I'm too triggered right now. I'm too triggered right now to actually untrigger myself. That's what you're saying. I'm too triggered right now. I have to step into the triangle. I'm too triggered right now. I can't take RR. I'm too triggered right now. I can't actually name my feelings. I'm too triggered right now. I won't actually sit with my feelings. I'm too triggered right now. I can't actually go and work out and go get a drink of water and step away from my desk and count to 10 and maybe sit in meditation and get in my journal and write it out. I'm too triggered to do any of those things. Now that I've given you a laugh, let's give you a couple other examples. Being confused. I'm confused. What I'm talking about is hiding behind being confused. Telling yourself you're too confused to sort anything out. I'm too confused to take action. It's like, no, you just haven't actually sat down and processed anything. You haven't actually started talking about anything. You're just all up in your head right now. And then obviously there's the being too tired. I'm just too tired. I'm so tired. I'm just so tired. When does the work end? I'm talking about that kind of tired. I'm not talking about like you're actually tired and you actually like need to go to sleep. Being too raw. I'm just too raw right now. Another flavor of being too triggered, okay? Being too raw is like, I'm so sensitive. I'm so split open right now. I can't look at anything. I just have to lay down. Now, let me pull back a little bit, okay? 100% we can feel confused. 100% we can feel too tired. We can feel too raw. Okay, we can feel too triggered. These are all very, very real things, okay? I'm talking about using it as a reason why you can't fill in the blank. The next time that comes up for you, think about that, right? Are you again hiding behind that? Are you using it as an excuse? This is another one of my favorites. You're a special snowflake and no one can understand what you've been through, what you're going through, what your experience was like because of cultural stuff, because of your perceived grandiosity of the situation or whatever. And this can apply to so many different cases and scenarios, right? Like no one understands what I'm going through. And I think this is really dangerous because it's maybe part of your work in a situation like this is to simply share your story. Maybe your work in a situation of no one understands what I'm going through is actually to just simply share your story, to just share your truth, to finally speak on it instead of holding it all on the inside and letting it be emotional poison in your heart. But if you have this whole idea of, oh, no one understands what I'm going through, then you don't talk about it, you don't reach out for help, and then you just stay in it, right? You stay a victim of the situation, or maybe you stay othering, which then ripples into other things of you not actually being able to continue to receive, you not being able to build relationships, you not being able to come closer to people, let alone have a breakthrough. That can also show up with like trauma, right? There's no one can understand what I've went through, right? What I've went through is so bad. What I've went through is so bad. I'm like, maybe it's so bad to you, but until you actually start talking about it and you start releasing it, you're never gonna get that perspective. You're never actually gonna get that healing. You're never gonna actually shrink the size of your perceived trauma. And so there are many, many ways that this thinking of no one understands what I'm going through, big and small, from trauma to cultural, to small incidents to big incidents, big T's to little T's. There's so many ways that this can show up. So just be mindful of this mindset because it can really be a way for you to not bother actually doing the work. Let's move on. I really want to touch on this one, claiming you need to learn the lesson the hard way. This is something that I see happen quite often. And, honestly, I used to say this a lot about myself as well. And I used to always say like, oh, I'm just so stubborn. I just have to learn it the hard way. It's the only way that I could learn. And I really look back on those years when I used to say that. And honestly, I was still just reckless. I was still just going fast. And I wasn't really being that mindful. And when I really look back on those years and I see first and foremost how immature I was, when you hear yourself or when you find yourself using this excuse of like, oh, well, I just need to learn the hard way. And it's like, well, maybe it's not that you're just learning the hard way. Maybe it's just that like, you just don't actually want to slow down. Maybe you actually don't want to do the hard thing. So you keep putting yourself in the same situation. Maybe you're actually just being really stubborn and you're not asking for help. So you're suffering in the process. Maybe you're actually just still being really emotionally immature and you're not growing. I think yes, to a certain degree, especially when we're younger, especially when we're early in our journey, we do learn the hard way. And sometimes that's necessary as part of your growth process. Many of us have learned things the hard way because we messed up. And that's okay. Sometimes you do have to learn it the hard way. But I think you continuing something that's dysfunctional, or when you know it's out of integrity and then claiming that you need to learn it the hard way, I think that is really a slippery slope. And that's just full-blown bypassing. Similarly, claiming that you are pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone when you're actually doing something that's maybe dysfunctional. I see a lot of people do this with, for example, dating apps. Oh, isn't that what I need? I haven't been, I was in a long-term relationship. I just got out of a long-term relationship. I don't know what it's like to date. Shouldn't I go on a dating app and push myself outside of my comfort zone because I've been in a long-term relationship? Really? Is that what you need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone? Do you really need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone by putting yourself in a situation where you might be in danger, or putting yourself in a situation where you might get into an unhealthy or dysfunctional situation? I don't know. Just be careful of this kind of language. This is one that I see happen like crazy, claiming that you need time to process. Once again, there's nuance to this. Yes, of course, sometimes we need time to process. But if you claim claim that you need time to process because you're actually not doing any processing, which happens all the time. That's bypassing. Claiming that you are healing, but you're just partying all the time. I see this a lot, especially after people go through breakups. Oh, like I'm finally doing me. I'm healing, like I'm learning how to like spend time with myself. I'm loving. It's like, nah, man, you're just partying all the time. And that's fine. That's fine. But I do think that I see this happen a lot, especially in Burning Man spaces, party spaces. I see this happen a lot in rave spaces, right? I see this happen in a lot of party spaces. That it's like, oh, I'm just like on my own like healing journey right now, but you're like literally popping a molly every single weekend. I know this sounds like a silly example, but I think you can replace this with anything, by the way. You could replace this with traveling. You could replace this with going out. You could replace this with having fun, like whatever, fill in the blank. I see this a lot with the travel people too. You're claiming that you're healing, but all you're doing is just traveling all the time. Oh, I'm healing. I'm on my own journey. I don't need a man. I'm finally finding myself. I'm finally living for me. But all you're doing is just traveling and just trying to rack up experiences and show everybody how great you're doing. You're not healing. You're actually more wounded than ever because now you have to prove to everybody how you're not wounded. And then that's even more complicated because when you do finally go and do the work, now you got to undo all that too. And so I think this is something that I just want to make sure that we stay ahead of. Bypassing also shows up as constantly on the go, filling your calendar as opportunities. I think this is really important to point out. I know we talk about this all the time, but I think this is another one of those things that kind of just goes, yeah, I know. But this is the reason why I highlighted opportunities, because with opportunities, we again tell ourselves that this is an opportunity because we don't want to see that it's actually a bypass. That is my entire point. So I want you to look out for when you say, oh, I'm seeing this as an opportunity, when it's really just something that's just you trading one dysfunction for another, or you just trading one distraction for another, or you trading one problem for another. And so you might think of that as an opportunity, but it's really not.